Well, hey everyone, thanks for joining us. My name is Joe with Layton Construction Cameras. Today, I'm going to be joined by Layton's own Austin Lay. He's going to tell us some really practical tips on using, visual data capture in the field, whether that be cameras, drones, reality capture, all those things. He's going to talk to us about how his team does that without disrupting the flow of the job site and really practical ways to implement it and get the team's buy-in and how it works for them over at Layton. So without any further ado, Austin, why don't you introduce yourself real quick?
Yeah, wonderful. Well, thanks, Joe, to you and the whole TrueLook team for having me do this with you. It's always fun to work with our partners on stuff. But yeah, Austin Lay, I'm with Layton Construction. We're a GC based out of Salt Lake City, Utah. I've been here now for about 10 years. We are part of a bigger organization, the STO Building Group as well, and they're based out of New York. And so it's been fun to watch over the 10 years that I've been here, the reality capture side of things really grow, right? It started with myself kind of just doing some drone shots here and there into the 360 camera, side cameras, and then laser scanning. So it really has grown into something really big. And so just really excited about where things are going, always looking to, push that boundary in reality capture and always trying to find kind of the next iterations of tools that are out there. And we're grateful for TrueLook and their partnership as they're pushing the envelope with the static cameras on our job sites.
Awesome. We super appreciate you being here. Given your experience, what are some of the most common challenges you see when teams try and capture visual data on a busy job site?
Time. I think time's the most important, one of the things that really struggles, right? Because you're either a project team that may be running a little lean, trying to get get the most out of as little people as you can. There's always going to be something that comes up, right? There's always going to be an RFI. There's always going to be something that is going to pull your attention aside. And so, what we try to do, or at least what I try to do when I talk to project teams, is when we come to them with a piece of technology, I always try to use I don't want to call it a slogan, but it's more like a phrase of like, look, what I'm trying to do is fit into your workflow, not add to your workflow. And so we try to find things that are automated, that are simple, that these project teams can do quickly if they need to interact with them, and in some cases, not interact with them at all. They just set them and forget them. So that it's a little bit of a long-winded answer, but I think time really becomes the biggest challenge. Education's big too. Once people are educated on something and they know why it's important, or they understand or see why it's important, then it's a little easier for them to fill that time part up. But yeah, I'd say that's probably the biggest, I guess, hurdle or obstacle we face when it comes to that.
Yeah, it's got to be beneficial for them too. Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing when we spend time out in the field is it can't just be beneficial overall for the company. I think there's value in every stakeholder having a piece of the pie and it helping them.
Definitely, absolutely.
Awesome. All right. So how have visual capture tools like job site cameras and drones changed the way that you and your team document progress?
Yeah, I think the biggest change we saw was, and I think this is probably pretty much standard across the industry, but 2020, right, when things shut down, and we all, construction's not really a job you can work from home, but there is parts of it that was that. But I think more importantly, it was the owners, the architects, the different people who normally would be traveling to these projects, no longer were doing that or nearly as much, and so that's when site documentation really took off because the ability to log into your TrueLook platform and look at the camera, the ability to look at the drone, from the videos and images and the panos and those things like that. That's really, for us, at least in my opinion, when it really started to take off and grow. It was definitely important before that and people were consuming it. But I think a lot more people were on site and doing things. And I think we've evolved as an industry. I think we've learned that while you cannot construct and build a project while you're sitting at home, there's a lot that can now be done from the comfort of, maybe the office or maybe not always being on site, right? There's always going to be a need for a superintendent or a project engineer to be on site, but maybe that project manager who is working through 2 or 3 different projects now can check in on his projects via a TrueLook camera or a drone deploy platform to be able to see what's going on and maybe get the answers that he needs through that instead of having to pick up the phone and call a superintendent or even travel to the site. And so that to me is really where a big key of documenting project sites really took a turn in a positive way, given all that was going on at that time.
The COVID stuff definitely was not fun, but some great technology came out of it. It's undeniable. All right. Our next question. Many people worry about what bringing new tools like drones onto a job site will slow things down. How do you integrate these tools into the workflow without causing delays or getting in the way of the crew?
Yeah, I mean, I think the most truthful answer I can give you is that it will cause a little bit of a bump in the beginning because you're trying to teach people something new. And I think that in itself can be a little scary to project teams because it, I, I got young kids myself, right? And I look at them when I teach them to ride a bike, right? Does any kid hop on a bike the first time and take off? And they probably could, and there probably are some that do, but I think for the most part, there's a little bit of bumps and bruises along the way. And so for me, it's, how can we better refine the training process? How can we better understand the time that we have with the team to get it going? And I think for us, that's one thing that Layton's really focused on and done a lot of good work on is let's let's hammer out the details here in the office, and then when we get to the field, it's a much more smooth process. Now, that doesn't mean it's always going to go as planned. There's always going to be bumps again once you get out there. But I think trying to, I guess, master your craft before you get to that is helpful. Again, too, going back to kind of fitting into the workflow, a reason we started working closely with you all at TrueLook is, there's like a white glove service turnover. We can hire you guys to come install the cameras, set them up. And at that point, other than teaching someone how to create a time lapse or how to, operate the system, there's not a lot of legwork on the project team side to have to really get in there and do a whole lot. And so that's what we're getting at. And then you have the advancement of dock drones, where now these drones sit in a box and they fly out. That's saving our project teams a whole lot of time and a whole lot of money because before you're sending someone out there to sit there, launch the drone, let it fly, possibly battery swap, then, bringing that data in, trying to upload on, sometimes really unstable Wi-Fi, that can take time. So we're seeing advancements in all kinds of stuff. When you look at 360 camera capture, right, there's the Boston Dynamics Spot and different types of robots that will carry payloads now. And those are really interesting and nice too, because that allows you to, again, kind of remove the human element of someone actually physically walking the site, but then having those same tools readily available to you.
Yeah, you brought up some great points. So the last kind of tech conference I was at, for the last few years, it's kind of been dominated by software. It's all been what's the software and what's the AI. I think the coolest stuff I saw was robotics here recently at a show we were at. I mean, everything around robotics was really, felt game changing and kind of taking that pressure off the field. It felt like the why was apparent. Like anybody in the room would understand the why. It wasn't hard to explain, which is great. So
Yeah, and that's
that's a
what we
good
want to
point.
see. We want to see advancements in both the hardware and the software because really they're like, that's how it works. The software is, powers the hardware, but you need both to work and you need them both to work well to accomplish the goals you have.
Yep, that's a good point. Awesome. All right, our next question. Could you share some specific examples of how you've used visual data from cameras to solve a problem or make a critical decision on a project?
I can tell you that for the majority of projects that have cameras, right, I think the thing that is the most, I guess, glaring positive is that the fact that you can go back and see things and, what happened the day before that, or security recordings or different things like that that allow you to understand what's going on. Another big part of what we're seeing is people are estimators and different things like that who work in our office will get into the cameras to kind of see, okay, what project is a stage at? Do we need to be buying anything? Do we need to be, and that was something that I never really thought the cameras would be used for example, but it's cool to see how once you implement a piece of technology, I found the most fascinating part about it is how different people will start to use it. And so how I looked at it was like purely from a standpoint of like, here's this camera that's going to do some job site monitoring that's going to allow us to do a really clean time lapse. And that's pretty much all I was looking for it to do. But then you start having these conversations with different people to the organization, and you're finding out that we have estimators, safety managers, all kinds of different people popping into these cameras and checking on different things that they're looking for, giving them that kind of third person view of what is going on in there. And so I think it's really fascinating, honestly. And to give like specific examples, there's a lot of times where we're looking for, obviously people breaking into the site. That's super helpful. But also from the safety side of it, right? If you have a safety incident, it's really nice to be able to go back and say, okay, we had this kind of bird's eye view, this advantage of what happened. Obviously, safety is the most important thing when it comes to construction, and hopefully, you don't have safety instances. But it is really nice when you can look back on it and say, okay, here's what happened. Here's how we're going to fix it.
Yeah, and you mentioned some really good stuff there. I think the breadth of people who are using job site cameras and 360 cameras and drones and how they're using them is kind of like pushing the industry to be better as a whole. I think we're seeing where you mentioned AI and safety and all of those things. Like if a camera's there, it should be helping you with your safety audits. Like, it's smart enough to do that these days. It should be doing that. I think that's a really good point, and we probably don't talk about that enough. We talk a lot about that first level user and solving their challenges, but there's definitely more people there to help.
Yeah, no, and even our schedulers will look in on it and say, okay, what part of the schedule are we in? I think we have schedulers who have to cover 4 or 5 projects at a time, and they try their best to be in the moment and in the on the site, but a lot of times it can be difficult. And so, yeah, anytime you can tap into a resource that allows you to view things holistically like that, I mean, you can't hide much, right, from a camera. It's there. What do they say? A picture's worth 1,000 words. Well, what's a video worth then, right? If you can and watch that. So it's a level of security, obviously. It's a level of being able to put together a really clean time lapse, but then you just start to drill down into, okay, well, a lot of people don't care about a time lapse. Maybe they just want to understand what they're looking at. And so it really is fascinating and neat to just have these conversations internally and see where people are actually using the camera. Because, again, like I said, for me, it was just something that creates a pretty time lapse and does some security stuff, was all my intention was in the beginning. And just to see how it's grown into what, the kind of beast it is has been really cool.
Awesome. And thanks for sharing that with the audience. I think, people get a lot out of hearing how other companies are doing things. So that's super helpful. All right. We'll jump to our next question. Could you share some specific examples of how you've used visual data from drones to solve a problem or make a critical decision on a project? So we just mentioned cameras a little bit. I think drones will fall into this, but do you have maybe a more specific example there?
If a job site camera allows you to kind of get on that fixed angle, well, drone's kind of like, we talk a lot about that as like your Google Earth image, right? It's allowing you to take all these photos that are shot at straight down and create this beautiful orthomosaic map that you're able to view, measure, do all kinds of stuff with. One of the powerful tools we use is drone deploy, and with that, we can overlay our documents onto these maps. And so what a lot of times we'll do is we'll overlay footings and foundation plans. Years and years ago, I was working on a project with a project team, I should say, and they were getting ready to pour concrete. They had not poured concrete yet, but they were getting ready to, and so they wanted to test this piece of software tool that allowed them to overlay their kind of their footings and foundation. Well, when they overlaid it, they noticed that the footings and foundation for the elevator shaft were not lining up with what the drawing said, which just piqued the interest of the superintendent. And so he quickly ran out there and they did some, quick field verification and realized that it technically wasn't. It needed to be dug, like, I think a foot or two more to the east or west. I can't remember exactly. And they were able to resolve that problem within a matter of minutes and then pour the concrete with no problem. I can only imagine the headache that would have been, especially with it being an elevator shaft, if you would have poured that. And so that's not to say that, like, I mean, that mistakes happen all the time, things happen like that, but to be able to quickly verify and understand exactly where things are, I think is really the key to drones and being able to see things from such a 200 to 300 foot point of view, because you're kind of seeing things a lot differently than you would from your advantage.
Time and energy and frustration they're probably saved was worth even more than the dollars potentially of
For
what you'd lose
sure.
if that would happen. All right. Next question is, what is a major myth you've heard about using drones or cameras for job site documentation? And then what's the reality?
I don't know. I get asked a lot, like, can this camera see through a wall, or can this piece of equipment see beneath the surface? There's definitely things out there that do those things, but when we talk about some of this, the tools of reality capture, which are drones, 360 cameras, fixed cameras, and also laser scanning, we definitely see that more in the laser scanning side of things, where it's like you go into laser scan and they're like, okay, we want to understand everything behind this wall. And it's like, well, this isn't actually going to do that. There's technology out there for that, but laser scanning is like it's just like your eyes. If I can see it, the laser's gonna see it. If I can't see it, the laser's not gonna see it. And so that's probably one of the bigger myths. I think too, and this really isn't a myth. This is more just maybe some misunderstanding. But I think people think, okay, you just flew the drone. Now give me all my information. Like we can, but there's some processing. Okay, and then there's also a few other steps involved. Whether you're bringing in a design file or a design surface from an architect or engineer or civil contractor, there's just a few steps that have to be done before you can get some of the information you're looking for. I think that's the one cool thing about technology, though, is that it has allowed us as construction professionals to have data so quickly. But sometimes we have to remember, like, okay, even though it comes quickly, there is some steps involved in making sure we have the right and accurate data.
Modern age has made us all a little impatient, probably,
It's true.
just the truth of
Yes.
it. I think the thing we see sometimes too, and maybe you can speak to this, is sometimes we hear from the field that they feel like a camera on a site or a drone is kind of like a big brother scenario. But in reality, I'd say this, and you can tell me what your experience has been. In reality, what we find is more often than not is the cameras are validating that everybody's doing a great job and that it's protecting more than it's looking in on. So when folks go to pull footage for an incident or whatever the case is, was someone here when they said they were here? More often than not, it's actually protecting the company that's using it. I don't see many scenarios where they're not happy that they had that piece of footage. Have you
Yeah.
ever kind of dealt with that on any of your project teams, and how have you overcome it if you have?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, of course, but my question immediately back is like, what are you doing something you don't want being seen? Like, I mean, it's kind of to me it makes sense. Like, I get, the privacy of your own home, that's one thing, but like, come on, you're out on a project job site and stuff. I mean, there's so many things going on. You have a conversation at lunch with your friends, and then you open Instagram or Facebook, and that whatever you were talking about, that ad's now right front and center. So you're being listened to. The point of all this is like, to your point is correct. It's like this is to show off how well you're doing. It's to help you with things.
What are some practical tips you can share for a team that's just starting to use cameras or drones to document their project?
Yeah, I mean, I think I say this a lot, and it might come across as like a bit of a broken record, but it's like, you got to find a support from the top down. It's really hard to push from the bottom up, and I think we at Layton found that early on that, we tried to find someone who was high up who could support and almost champion it for us, and say, hey, this is something that I think we should start implementing on projects. And then from there, it was a simple thing of like rolling it out. But I also think it's kind of like you don't need to go into a full dead sprint when you start this, right? It's like maybe you start with one camera on one site and like kind of give a proof of concept, proof of value to be able to show even your whole company, like, hey, this really is a valuable tool. I think sometimes people want everything at once, and it's like maybe it's just the very most basic standard camera you start with, or very most basic standard drone you start with, and just learn how it works, learn how it, operates, and then from there you can start to scale it. And so that's really my advice to a lot of people, is sometimes just going simple and easy to start really is where you can find the most success.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's great feedback. All right. Looking ahead, what emerging technologies or trends do you see shaping the future of visual capture in construction? You know
Yeah, I
mine. I
think
think
you
it's
kind of
robotics in some sense, but
yeah, no, I literally was just gonna say, you said robots, and I agree with that. I think there's a lot going out right now with robots, or going on with robots. It's really cool to see. And I think, and you may hear this too from people, but obviously it's like oh, our jobs are about to be taken over by all these robots, and I don't necessarily believe that. What I believe is that it will be there to supplement what we're already doing, right? It's the freeing up the human element to do what's probably more important, which is making sure that building or that project is completed on time. Where the robots will help is with all the stuff, all the technology stuff that you're needing information from. And so it's not going to replace anybody, in my opinion. But what I'm really excited for, though, and it's a little eerie, I think, is some of these like humanoid robots. Like, I don't think we're too far off when we see one of those just kind of like rolling through a job site carrying a 360 camera, capturing stuff like that. And so I'm always excited for what's next in that phase. I think also too, cameras and drones are getting the sensors on drones are getting better and better. The new drone that we use from DJI has like a 0.5 second shutter. So I mean, it is incredible to see that. The Insta360 cameras we like to use have bigger sensors, capture in better low light. And so I think it's like everything. Sometimes I'll see a release of something and I'm like, how does that even get better? And then within a year, it's like, here's the next thing, and it's it's better. So overall, I mean, that's the exciting part about being in, construction tech. It's always going to be evolving. But I think at the end of the day, yeah, the robot part is really cool to see.
As a kid, I remember thinking that with video games. Like I was like, how is this video game ever going to get better? And they just
Oh,
obviously get
yeah.
better every day. That's
Yeah,
all.
it's
That's all.
funny. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I was gonna say if we could, I grew up playing video games. We'll save that part for later, but yeah.
Awesome. Well, hey, thanks for your time, Austin. As always, it's so fun to talk to you and your team and kind of hear what you're doing and what's working for you. Thanks everyone who stopped in to watch. There will be more Field Forward series. You can catch it on our YouTube channel or on our website, and we'll see you out there. We appreciate you.